The dust devils swirled across the parched earth of southern New Mexico territory as Theresa Dalton stumbled along the rutted wagon trail, her vision blurring at the edges like an old daguerreotype left too long in the sun. She had not eaten in 3 days, and the canteen at her hip had been empty since yesterday morning when she had drunk the last tepid drops of alkaline water. The year was 1878, and the late August sun beat down mercilessly on the high desert country, turning the world into a shimmering mirage of impossible distances and false promises. She had been traveling alone since her father's death 2 weeks prior, the consumption finally claiming him in a dusty hotel room in El Paso. They had been heading north to Santa Fe where her aunt supposedly lived, though Theresa had never met the woman and possessed only a yellowed letter with an address that might no longer be current. Her father's body lay in a pauper's grave somewhere behind her, and all their money had gone to the undertaker and the hotel keeper who claimed they owed for 4 nights instead of 3. She had sold everything except the clothes on her back and her mother's silver locket, which hung around her neck beneath the high collar of her traveling dress. The dress itself was a ruin now, the dark blue fabric caked with dust and torn at the hem where she had caught it on a mesquite branch. Her boots, once fine leather bought in St. Louis before their fortunes had turned, were cracking at the seams, and her feet screamed with blisters that had burst and reformed and burst again. She no longer felt them much, which she suspected was not a good sign. The ranch house appeared before her like an answered prayer, materializing out of the heat waves with solid wooden walls and a covered porch that promised shade. Theresa did not remember making the decision to turn off the road, but her feet carried her forward automatically, drawn by the possibility of water, of help, of anything that might keep her alive for another day. She could see a well in the yard and a barn beyond, and there were horses in a corral that meant people, living people who might spare a cup of water for a dying girl. She made it to the porch steps before her legs simply refused to carry her further. The world tilted sideways and the wooden planks rushed up to meet her. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her was the solid thud of her body hitting the ground and the distant sound of a door opening. Warren Vaughn had been mending a bridle in his front room when he heard the thump on his porch. He set down the leather and brass buckle and walked to the door, expecting perhaps a coyote or one of his dogs, though the sound had been heavier than that. What he found instead was a young woman lying in a crumpled heap at the base of his porch steps, her face pressed against the weathered wood, and one arm flung out as if reaching for the door. He was down the steps in an instant, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust as he dropped to his knees beside her. She was breathing, thank God, but her breaths were shallow and rapid, and when he touched her cheek, her skin was burning hot. He looked around quickly, checking for any sign of who she might be with, but the road was empty in both directions, and there was no horse or wagon in sight. Warren was 32 years old and had been living alone on this ranch for the better part of 8 years. He had built it up from nothing with his own 2 hands, and the money he had saved from working cattle drives up from Texas. He was not unused to solitude, and had grown to prefer it after the chaos of his younger years. But the sight of this woman lying unconscious on his property stirred something protective in him that he had thought long dormant. Without further hesitation, he slid his arms beneath her, one under her shoulders and one under her knees, and lifted her as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel the bones of her ribcage through the fabric of her dress. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This woman was starving. He carried her up the steps and through the front door, kicking it closed behind him with his boot heel. His bedroom was the coolest room in the house, facing north with a window he kept open to catch the breeze that came down from the mountains in the evening. He laid her on his bed, his only bed, and quickly set about getting her comfortable. Her dress had a high collar that looked like it was choking her, so he carefully unbuttoned the top few buttons to give her air. Her skin beneath was pale despite the sunburn on her face, and he could see the rapid flutter of her pulse in her throat. Water first. He went to the kitchen and filled a cup from the pitcher he kept on the counter, then soaked a clean cloth in the cool liquid. Back in the bedroom, he sat on the edge of the bed and carefully dribbled a few drops of water onto her cracked lips. She did not respond at first, but when he tried again, her tongue moved reflexively and she swallowed. Encouraged, he continued this slow process, giving her tiny sips and wiping her forehead with the damp cloth. It took nearly 10 minutes before her eyelids began to flutter. Warren found himself holding his breath as she struggled toward consciousness, her brow furrowing in confusion. When her eyes finally opened, they were the color of honey in sunlight, brown with flecks of gold and green, and they stared up at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "You are safe," he said quietly, his voice rougher than he intended. "You collapsed on my porch. Do not try to move yet. Here, drink this slowly." He brought the cup to her lips again, and she drank greedily, but he pulled it away after a few swallows. "Not too much at once, or you will make yourself sick. When did you last eat?" Theresa tried to speak, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. She swallowed and tried again. 3 days, maybe 4, I lost count. Warren swore under his breath and stood. "I am going to make you some broth. Your stomach cannot handle much more right now. Do not try to get up. I will be right back." He left the room before she could protest, though he suspected she did not have the strength to protest anything at the moment. In his kitchen, he moved with quick efficiency, putting a pot of water on the stove to heat and cutting up vegetables and a bit of chicken he had left from his own dinner the night before. While the broth simmered, he went back to check on her. She had not moved from where he left her, but her eyes were open and tracking him as he entered the room. There was intelligence in those eyes, and wariness too, which he supposed was only natural. She had no reason to trust him. "My name is Warren Vaughn," he said, standing in the doorway so as not to crowd her. "This is my ranch about 15 miles south of Las Cruces. You are in New Mexico territory. Can you tell me your name?" "Theresa Dalton," she managed, her voice a little stronger now. "I was traveling to Santa Fe. My father died in El Paso. I was walking because I had no money for a stage." Warren felt his jaw tighten. The idea of a woman alone walking hundreds of miles through this country was madness, but he suspected she had not had much choice. "Well, Miss Dalton, you are lucky you made it this far. Another day in this heat without water and you would be past helping. The broth should be ready soon. After you eat, you can rest. We will talk more when you are stronger." She nodded, and he saw tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I did not think anyone would find me. I thought I would die on the road." "You are not going to die," Warren said firmly. "Not on my watch. Now rest. I will be back shortly." He returned to the kitchen and strained the broth into a bowl, making sure it was not too hot. He had seen men sickened by eating too much too fast after a period of starvation, and he was determined that this woman would not suffer any more than she already had. When he brought the bowl back to the bedroom, she was lying with her eyes closed, but they opened immediately when he entered. He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, and handed her the bowl with a spoon. "Small sips," he cautioned. "Let your stomach adjust." Theresa took the bowl with shaking hands and brought a spoonful to her lips. The hot liquid was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted, rich with chicken fat and vegetables and herbs she could not identify. She wanted to gulp it down, to fill the aching void in her belly, but the cowboy was watching her with such concern that she forced herself to go slowly. Each spoonful was a small miracle, warmth spreading through her chest and limbs as her body began to remember what nourishment felt like. Halfway through the bowl, she felt her stomach rebel and she set it aside quickly. "I am sorry. I cannot eat any more right now." "You did fine," Warren assured her. "Rest now. When you wake up, you can have more. Your body needs time to adjust." He took the bowl from her and helped her lie back down. Within minutes, she was asleep again, her breathing deeper and more regular than before. Warren stood watching her for a long moment, this strange woman who had literally fallen into his life. She was beautiful in a fragile sort of way, with dark hair that curled around her face and those remarkable eyes. But more than her appearance, it was her situation that pulled at him. She had been so close to dying, and something about that possibility made his chest tight. He left her sleeping and went about his evening chores, feeding the horses and checking on the cattle in the near pasture. His ranch was not large by some standards, but it was enough for one man to manage with occasional help from a neighboring family. He ran about 200 head of cattle and a dozen horses, and he had built a reputation for breeding good cow ponies that could work all day in the heat without breaking down. As he worked, his mind kept returning to the woman in his bed. Theresa Dalton. She had been traveling alone to Santa Fe with no money, no horse, and apparently no real plan beyond putting one foot in front of the other. The kind of desperation that drove a person to such measures was something Warren understood better than most. He had his own history of hard times and harder choices, though it had been years since those days. When he returned to the house at dusk, he checked on her and found her still sleeping. He made himself a simple dinner of beans and cornbread and ate at the kitchen table, listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling and the distant call of coyotes starting their evening chorus. He had grown used to eating alone, to the silence of his own company, but tonight it felt different somehow. There was another heartbeat in the house, another life breathing under his roof, and it changed the quality of the solitude. Before he went to bed, he checked on her one more time. She had rolled onto her side and one hand was curled under her cheek like a child. In sleep, the lines of worry and exhaustion eased from her face, and he could see that she was younger than he had first thought, probably in her early 20s. Young enough to still have hope, if life had not beaten it all out of her yet. He spread a blanket on the floor of his front room and lay down there, leaving the bedroom to her. It was not comfortable, but comfort was less important than propriety. Whatever people might say about him, they could never say he had taken advantage of a woman in distress. With that thought to comfort him, he closed his eyes and drifted into a light sleep, part of him still listening for any sound from the other room. Theresa woke in the deepest part of the night, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the window, and it took her several heartbeats to remember where she was. The cowboy's house. The man who had found her and brought her inside and given her broth. Warren Vaughn, he had said his name was. She sat up slowly, testing her body's response. Her head still ached and she felt weak as a newborn kitten, but the crushing exhaustion had lifted somewhat. Her stomach growled, reminding her that half a bowl of broth was not nearly enough to make up for days of starvation. She wondered if he would mind if she went to the kitchen to find more food. The decision was made for her when her body's other needs became urgent. She needed the outhouse, and she needed it soon. Theresa swung her legs out of bed and stood carefully, holding onto the bedpost until she was sure her legs would hold her. They trembled but supported her weight, and she made her way slowly to the bedroom door. The front room was dark, but as her eyes adjusted, she could make out the shape of a man sleeping on the floor near the fireplace. Warren. He had given her his bed and taken the floor for himself. The realization made something warm unfold in her chest, a feeling she could not quite name, but that felt dangerously close to trust. She made her way as quietly as possible to the front door and slipped outside. The outhouse was easy to spot in the moonlight, a small structure about 20 yards from the main house. The night air was cool against her skin after the heat of the day, and she breathed it in gratefully as she made her way across the yard. When she returned to the house, she found Warren awake and lighting a lamp in the kitchen. He was dressed in pants and an undershirt, his feet bare and his dark hair sticking up on one side. He looked up as she entered, his expression concerned. "I heard you moving around. Are you all right?" "Yes, I just needed." She gestured vaguely back toward the door, feeling her face heat with embarrassment. "Of course. Are you hungry? I can heat up more broth, or there is bread and butter if you think you can handle it." "Bread sounds wonderful," she admitted. He gestured to one of the chairs at the kitchen table. "Sit. You should not be on your feet too long yet." Theresa sat gratefully while he busied himself at the counter, cutting thick slices from a loaf and spreading them with butter from a crock. He placed 2 slices in front of her along with a cup of water, then took the seat across from her with his own plate. She ate slowly, mindful of her stomach's fragile state, and watched him covertly from under her lashes. In the lamplight, she could see him more clearly than she had before. He was a handsome man in a weathered sort of way, with strong features and eyes that were a startling light blue against his tanned skin. There was gray threading through the dark hair at his temples, and lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. "How are you feeling?" he asked, catching her looking at him. "Better. Weak still, but better. I cannot thank you enough for what you have done for me. I thought I was going to die on that road." "You came close," Warren said bluntly. "What possessed you to try walking to Santa Fe alone? That is better than 200 miles from El Paso." Theresa looked down at her plate. "I had no choice. My father and I came west seeking a new start after my mother died 2 years ago. He had heard there was opportunity in the territories, but things did not work out the way he had hoped. He took sick in El Paso, and by the time he died, we had nothing left. I sold everything we had just to bury him properly. The only family I have left is my aunt in Santa Fe, and I had to try to reach her." "You have no money at all," she shook her head. "Nothing. I kept my mother's locket because I could not bear to part with it, but it is all I have left of my old life." Warren was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the table. "Miss Dalton, I want to propose something to you. Hear me out before you answer." Theresa looked up at him, wariness creeping back into her expression. She had learned the hard way that men did not offer help without expecting something in return. As if reading her thoughts, Warren held up his hands. "It is not what you are thinking. I am proposing honest work for honest pay. This ranch runs itself reasonably well, but there are tasks I neglect because I cannot be everywhere at once. The house is a mess. My clothes need mending, and I have been eating my own terrible cooking for 8 years. I could use someone to help with those things. In exchange, I will give you room and board and a small wage. When you have saved enough money, I will take you to Santa Fe myself and make sure you reach your aunt safely." It was the last thing Theresa had expected, and for a moment she could only stare at him. "You would do that?" "Let me stay here and work for you." "I would. You would have the bedroom, and I will continue sleeping out here. There is plenty of work to keep us both busy, so we would not be in each other's way much. And before you worry about propriety, my nearest neighbor is the Martinez family about 3 miles east. Consuela Martinez comes by once a week to trade eggs and vegetables from her garden. She can serve as chaperone if you need one, and she will also spread the word that you are here working honestly, which should keep the gossips at bay. Theresa felt tears prick her eyes again. It was more than she had dared to hope for, a chance to rest and recover and earn her way honestly. Why would you do this for a stranger? Warren was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes holding hers across the table. Because someone helped me once when I needed it. Because I have more than I need and you have nothing. Because it is the right thing to do. Take your pick of reasons, Miss Dalton. The offer stands regardless. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Then yes, I accept. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. I will work hard, I promise you that. I believe you will, he said with a small smile, and you can call me Warren. We are going to be living under the same roof after all. Might as well dispense with formalities. Then you should call me Theresa. Theresa it is. He stood and gathered their plates. Now you should get back to bed. Morning comes early on a ranch, and you still need to build your strength back up. We can discuss your duties tomorrow. Theresa returned to the bedroom and lay down, but sleep was slow to come. Her mind was spinning with this unexpected turn of events. A few hours ago, she had been dying on the road, certain she would never see another sunrise. Now she had a place to stay, food to eat, and the promise of honest work that would eventually get her to Santa Fe and her aunt. It seemed too good to be true, and yet Warren Vaughn did not strike her as the kind of man who said things he did not mean. She thought about the way he had looked at her across the table, his expression open and earnest. There had been kindness in those blue eyes, but also something else she could not quite identify. Not desire exactly, though she supposed he must have noticed that she was a woman. It was more like recognition, as if he saw something in her situation that resonated with his own experience. Finally, exhaustion pulled her under and she slept deeply, dreamlessly, for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Theresa woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Sunlight was streaming through the bedroom window, and she realized with a start that it must be well past dawn. She dressed quickly in the same dusty traveling dress, wishing desperately for something clean to wear, and made her way to the kitchen. Warren was at the stove, tending a skillet of bacon and eggs. He glanced over his shoulder as she entered. "Good morning. I let you sleep. Your body needs rest more than anything right now. There is coffee in the pot and breakfast will be ready in a minute." "I should be the one cooking for you," Theresa protested. "That was part of our agreement." "Starting tomorrow," Warren said firmly. "Today you are going to take it easy and let yourself recover. I will not have you collapsing on me again." He served up 2 plates of food and they ate together at the kitchen table. The eggs were a little overdone and the bacon slightly burnt, but to Theresa it tasted like heaven. Her stomach accepted the food gratefully, and she felt strength flowing back into her limbs with each bite. After breakfast, Warren showed her around the property. The ranch house itself was modest but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a front room that served as both living and dining space, and a good-sized kitchen. There was a barn for the horses, a chicken coop that currently held no chickens, a storage shed, and the outhouse. Beyond the immediate yard, the land stretched out in rolling hills covered with grass and scattered mesquite trees, with the purple shadows of mountains visible in the distance. "The cattle range over about 500 acres, Warren explained as they stood on the porch looking out over his land. "Most of it is open range, but I have title to the water rights on 2 springs, which is what really matters out here. I run a mixed herd, mostly longhorns with some Mexican cattle mixed in. Twice a year I drive them to market in Las Cruces." "It is beautiful," Theresa said honestly. The land had a harsh beauty to it, spare and unforgiving but magnificent in its own way. The sky seemed impossibly big, stretching from horizon to horizon in a dome of blue so bright it hurt to look at. It can be. It can also be hell, depending on the weather and the cattle prices and 1,000 other things I cannot control. But it is mine, and that counts for something. They walked down to the barn, where Warren introduced her to his horses. There were 6 saddle horses and 6 work horses, each one greeted by name as he checked their water and feed. Theresa found herself smiling at the way he talked to them, his voice gentle and affectionate in a way that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. One of the horses, a pretty paint mare, stretched her neck over the stall door and nuzzled at Theresa's shoulder. "That is Daisy," Warren said. "She is the gentlest of the lot. If you want to learn to ride, she would be a good choice." "I have never been on a horse," Theresa admitted. "We will fix that. Out here, knowing how to ride is not optional, but that can wait until you are stronger." As they walked back to the house, Warren pointed out various tasks that needed doing. The vegetable garden behind the house was overgrown with weeds. The chicken coop needed to be repaired before he could get new chickens. The curtains in the house were gray with dust. The front porch steps were loose and needed nails. "I keep meaning to do all of it," he said with a rueful shake of his head. "But there are only so many hours in a day, and the cattle have to come first. Now that you are here, maybe we can get this place looking respectable again." "I will do my best," Theresa promised. They spent the rest of the morning in companionable quiet, Warren mending tack in the barn while Theresa rested on the porch with a basket of his clothes that needed mending. Her hands remembered the motions of sewing from years of helping her mother, and she found the repetitive task soothing. Every so often she would look up and see Warren moving around the barn, and each time she felt that strange flutter in her chest again. He had saved her life. More than that, he had offered her a way forward when she had none. And he had done it with no expectation of anything improper in return, which made him unlike most men she had known. Her father had been a good man but a weak one, unable to stand up to bad luck or bad decisions. The men she had encountered since his death had been either indifferent or predatory, seeing in her situation an opportunity to exploit. Warren Vaughn seemed to be something else entirely. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense that he knew exactly who he was and needed nothing from anyone else to validate that. It was both intimidating and deeply attractive. The thought brought her up short. Attractive. She should not be thinking such things about the man who had taken her in out of charity. It was inappropriate and dangerous besides. She was his employee, nothing more, and she needed to remember that. But as the days passed, Theresa found it increasingly difficult to maintain that mental boundary. Warren was unfailingly kind and courteous, treating her with a respect she had rarely experienced. He never raised his voice, never made demands, never treated her as anything less than a capable partner in the work of running the ranch. When she made mistakes, which she did often in those early days, he corrected her gently and showed her the right way without making her feel foolish. More than that, he was interesting. In the evenings after the work was done, they would sit on the porch as the heat of the day faded and talk about everything and nothing. Warren had lived a fascinating life before settling on this ranch. He had been a drover on the cattle trails as a young man, had seen the mining camps of Colorado and the boom towns of Kansas. He had fought Indians and outlaws, had nearly died of pneumonia in a line shack one winter, had lost friends and made enemies and lived through things that would have broken lesser men. He spoke about these experiences without boasting, treating them as simply the facts of his life. And he listened when she talked too, asking questions about her childhood in Missouri, her mother's death, her father's dreams of starting fresh in the West. He did not judge or offer empty platitudes, just listened with those steady blue eyes and made her feel like her words mattered. Theresa had been at the ranch for 2 weeks when Consuela Martinez made her weekly visit. The older woman arrived in a wagon driven by her youngest son, a boy of about 15, and her eyes went wide when she saw Theresa hanging laundry in the yard. "Warren Vaughn," she called out as she climbed down from the wagon, "you have been keeping secrets." Warren emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. "Consuela, good to see you. Let me introduce you to Theresa Dalton. She is working for me now, helping with the house and such." Consuela looked Theresa up and down with sharp, dark eyes, taking in her mended dress and work-roughened hands. "Is that so? And where did you find this young lady?" "She fainted on my porch a couple weeks back," Warren said calmly, "nearly dead from hunger and thirst. I gave her a job and a place to stay. Everything is proper, I assure you." "Proper," Consuela repeated, her tone skeptical, but then her expression softened as she looked at Theresa. "You poor child. Come, let me see you properly." She took Theresa's hands in hers and examined her face with a grandmother's concern. "You have been through hard times, I can see that, but Warren is a good man, one of the best. If he says he will take care of you, then he will. Still, people will talk. They always do. You come to my house for dinner tomorrow, both of you. Let people see that you are respectable and that I vouch for you. That will help." "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez," Theresa said, feeling tears threaten again. She seemed to cry at the slightest kindness these days, her emotions raw and close to the surface. Consuela patted her cheek. "You call me Consuela, child. We will be friends, you and I. Now I brought eggs and some peppers from my garden, and I have a dress my daughter outgrew that might fit you. It is nothing fancy, but it is clean and whole, which is more than you have now, yes." "That would be wonderful," Theresa admitted. The dress proved to be a simple cotton garment in a pretty shade of green, and it fit reasonably well with a few adjustments. Consuela also brought news from Las Cruces. Gossip about people Theresa did not know but that Warren seemed to find interesting. As the women talked, Warren and Consuela's son unloaded supplies from the wagon and loaded it with a quarter of beef Warren had butchered the day before. After Consuela left, Warren found Theresa in the kitchen putting away the eggs and vegetables. "That went well," he said. "Consuela's approval means something around here. With her on your side, no one will dare say anything improper about you being here. People were going to talk about me." Theresa asked, troubled. Of course they were. A young woman staying with a bachelor. There would have been talk no matter what, but Consuela has a reputation for being a fierce judge of character. If she says you are respectable, then you are respectable, and anyone who suggests otherwise will have to deal with her. He grinned. "I would not want to be on that woman's bad side." Theresa found herself smiling back. "She was very kind to me, and this dress is such a gift. I have felt terrible wearing the same thing every day." "It suits you," Warren said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up sharply. His eyes held hers for a moment, and she saw in them an awareness that had not been there before, or perhaps that he had been hiding. He cleared his throat and looked away. "I should get back to work. Those fence posts will not replace themselves." He left quickly, and Theresa stood in the kitchen with her heart beating faster than it should. Something had shifted between them just then, some acknowledgement of the attraction that had been building beneath the surface of their careful friendship. She did not know whether to be thrilled or terrified. The dinner at the Martinez home the next evening was a revelation. Theresa had not been in a proper family setting since before her mother died, and the warmth and chaos of the Martinez household was both overwhelming and wonderful. Consuela and her husband, Ramon, had 7 children ranging from the 15-year-old boy who had driven the wagon to a baby girl just learning to walk. The house was full of noise and laughter and the smell of good food, and Theresa felt something tight in her chest begin to ease. Warren was clearly comfortable with the family, joking with the older children and helping Consuela serve the food with an ease that spoke of long familiarity. He sat beside Theresa at the long table and made sure she was included in the conversation, drawing her out when she would have stayed quiet and helping translate when the family slipped into Spanish. After dinner, the men went outside to smoke and talk, and Consuela pulled Theresa aside. "So," the older woman said, her eyes twinkling, "how long before you and Warren admit you are in love?" Theresa felt her face flame. "We are not. It is not like that. I work for him, that is all. Child, I have known Warren Vaughn for 8 years. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. And you watch him like a woman watches a man she cares for. There is no shame in it. You are both free to love where you choose." "Even if that were true," Theresa said quietly, "I have nothing to offer him. I am penniless and dependent on his charity. It would not be right." Consuela made a dismissive noise. "Love does not care about such things. Warren does not need your money, child. He needs someone to share his life with, someone who sees him for the good man he is. And you need someone who will value you and keep you safe. You are not children playing at love. You are both adults who have known hardship and loneliness. If you find happiness together, you should grab it with both hands." "I barely know him," Theresa protested, but even as she said it, she knew it was not entirely true. She felt like she knew Warren in ways that went deeper than the short time they had spent together. She knew his kindness and his strength, his quiet sense of humor and his unshakable integrity. She knew the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and the careful gentleness of his hands when he worked with the horses. She knew the sound of his voice in the early morning and the steady rhythm of his footsteps as he moved through the house. "You know him well enough," Consuela said wisely. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" On the ride back to the ranch that night, Warren and Theresa were both quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The wagon creaked over the rough road and the stars blazed overhead in their thousands, so bright they cast shadows on the ground. Finally, Warren broke the silence. "Consuela has been after me to get married for years now. I hope she did not make you uncomfortable with her meddling." "She did not meddle," Theresa said carefully. "She is just concerned about you. She thinks I am lonely. Maybe she is right. I have been alone a long time and I thought I preferred it that way. But having you at the ranch these past weeks, having someone to talk to and share meals with, I have realized what I have been missing." Theresa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "I have been happy there too, happier than I have been in a long time." Warren pulled the wagon to a stop, though they were still a mile from home. He turned to face her in the starlight. "Theresa, I know this is not the right time and I am probably a fool for saying anything, but I need you to know. You are not just an employee to me. You have not been just an employee since the first day you opened your eyes and looked at me. I think about you every moment of every day. I find excuses to be near you. I lie awake at night on that damned floor thinking about you sleeping in the next room. I know you came here with nothing and you are dependent on my help, which makes this wrong of me to say, but I have to say it anyway. I am falling in love with you, Theresa Dalton, and I do not know what to do about it." For a long moment, Theresa could not speak. Her throat was tight with emotion and her eyes were burning with tears that wanted to fall. When she finally found her voice, it came out shaky. "You are not a fool. You are the best man I have ever known, and I think I have been falling in love with you too, though I was afraid to admit it even to myself. Warren let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. "You mean that? You are not just saying it because you feel obligated. I mean it. Warren, you saved my life. But more than that, you gave me back my sense of worth. You treated me like a person who mattered, like my thoughts and feelings were important. You made me laugh again. You made me feel safe. How could I not love you?" He reached across the wagon seat and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "I want to do this right. I want to court you properly, give you time to be sure. I know things between us have moved fast because of the circumstances, but I do not want you to feel rushed or pressured. You can still go to Santa Fe to find your aunt if that is what you want. I will take you there and give you money to start fresh. But if you choose to stay, I want you to stay because you want to be with me, not because you have no other choice." "I choose you," Theresa said simply. "I do not need time to be sure, Warren. I already am sure. If you want me, I am yours." Warren lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then I am the luckiest man in New Mexico territory. Theresa Dalton, will you marry me?" "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her then, a gentle kiss full of promise and tenderness. Theresa melted into him, her hands coming up to cup his face, feeling the scratch of his whiskers against her palms. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard and Warren's eyes were darker than she had ever seen them. "We should get home," he said roughly, "before I forget myself entirely." They rode the rest of the way in charged silence, sitting close together on the wagon seat with their shoulders touching. When they reached the ranch, Warren helped her down from the wagon with exaggerated care, his hands lingering on her waist. At the door to the house, he kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt heat pool in her belly. 3 weeks, he said when he finally pulled away. "Give me 3 weeks to arrange things. We can have the wedding at the church in Las Cruces, and Consuela will help you get ready. I want to do this properly, want everyone to know that you are my wife and that I am the proudest man alive." 3 weeks, Theresa agreed, though part of her wanted to protest the delay, but Warren was right. Doing things properly mattered. She had already lived through enough scandal and hardship. She wanted this to be clean and right and above reproach. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Warren rode into Las Cruces and returned with fabric for a wedding dress, which Consuela and her eldest daughter helped Theresa sew. He ordered a ring from the jeweler, a simple gold band that he presented to her shyly one evening, asking if it would do. It was perfect, and she told him so. Word of the upcoming wedding spread quickly through the small community, and people who Theresa had never met came by the ranch to introduce themselves and offer congratulations. To her surprise, they were universally welcoming, treating her as one of their own. Several of the women made it a point to tell her how happy they were that Warren had finally found someone, that he had been alone too long and deserved happiness. The wedding took place on a bright September morning at the small Catholic church in Las Cruces. Theresa wore her new dress, simple but pretty in cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Someone had woven wildflowers into her hair, and she carried a small bouquet of the same blooms. Warren wore a new suit that he was clearly uncomfortable in, tugging at the collar until Consuela slapped his hand and told him to stop fidgeting. When Theresa walked down the aisle on Ramon Martinez's arm, her eyes found Warren's and the rest of the world fell away. He looked at her like she was the answer to a prayer he had not known he was praying, and she felt her heart swell with so much love she thought it might burst. The ceremony was brief, conducted in a mixture of English and Latin by an elderly priest who seemed pleased to be marrying off one of his wayward bachelor parishioners. When Warren slipped the ring onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his days, Theresa felt tears slide down her cheeks. And when the priest pronounced them man and wife and Warren kissed her in front of everyone, she felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The celebration afterward was held at the Martinez home, with half the town in attendance. There was music and dancing and more food than Theresa had seen in years. Warren kept her close to his side, his hand always finding hers, his eyes constantly seeking her out in the crowd. When they finally slipped away in the early evening, heading back to the ranch that was now their home together, he could not stop smiling. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said as he helped her into the wagon. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Theresa agreed, her own smile so wide it made her cheeks ache. The ride home seemed to take forever and no time at all. They talked about the wedding, laughing over small moments and marveling at the generosity of their neighbors. But underneath, the conversation was a current of anticipation, the knowledge that this night would be different from all the others, that they were finally, truly together in every way. When they reached the ranch, Warren lifted Theresa down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms. "I am carrying my bride over the threshold," he announced. "It is tradition." She laughed and threw her arms around his neck as he carried her through the door and straight to the bedroom. He set her down gently beside the bed and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you nervous?" he asked softly. "A little," she admitted. "But mostly I am just happy. I love you, Warren." "I love you too, more than I have words to say." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Theresa felt herself relax into him. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. She was no longer alone, no longer drifting through the world with no anchor or purpose. She was Warren's wife, and he was her husband, and that meant everything. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, punctuated by quiet laughter and whispered endearments. Warren was gentle with her, patient and careful, and when they finally came together it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Theresa's head on Warren's chest and his arms wrapped securely around her. "I was dying on that road," she said quietly into the darkness. "If you had not found me, I would be dead now. Instead, I am here with you, happier than I ever thought I could be. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Warren corrected. "I was dying too in my own way. I just did not realize it until you came along. This ranch, this life I had built, it was all empty without someone to share it with. You gave me a reason to care again, Theresa. You gave me hope." She lifted her head to kiss him. "Then we saved each other." "I guess we did." The months that followed their wedding were the happiest of Theresa's life. She threw herself into making the ranch house a proper home, planting flowers around the porch and putting up curtains in the windows, and generally civilizing the bachelor chaos that had reigned before her arrival. Warren watched her efforts with amusement and pleasure, frequently stopping his work just to come into the house and steal a kiss or tell her she was beautiful. They worked side by side during the day, Theresa learning the rhythms of ranch life and proving herself to be surprisingly capable. Warren taught her to ride, starting with gentle Daisy and gradually working up to more spirited horses. He showed her how to rope and brand cattle, how to doctor sick animals and mend fences. She proved to have a good eye for horses, and Warren began to rely on her judgment when evaluating new stock. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about their days or simply enjoying the comfortable silence of long familiarity. Sometimes Warren would pull out his guitar, an instrument Theresa had not known he possessed, and play old songs while she sang along. Other times they would read together, sharing the few books they owned and discussing them afterward. Their physical relationship deepened as well. the initial shyness giving way to passion and playfulness. They learned each other's bodies with the same thoroughness they applied to everything else, discovering what brought pleasure and what brought joy. There were nights when they barely slept, too caught up in each other to care about the morning's work, and mornings when they lingered in bed long past sunrise, reluctant to leave the warm cocoon of their shared intimacy. Winter came to southern New Mexico, bringing cold nights and occasional snow that dusted the mountains but rarely reached the valleys. Theresa discovered that she loved the winter evenings best, when they could huddle together by the fire and feel grateful for their warm house and full stomachs. She thought often of how different her life might have been, how close she had come to dying alone on that dusty road, and each time the thought made her hold Warren a little tighter. In the spring, Theresa realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited to be sure before telling Warren. When she finally did, choosing a quiet evening on the porch, he stared at her for a long moment as if not quite believing what he had heard. "A baby," he said finally. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes. Sometime in early autumn, I think." Warren let out a whoop and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. "I am going to be a father. You hear that, world? I am going to be a father." "Warren, put me down before you make me sick," Theresa protested, but she was laughing too hard for it to carry much conviction. He set her down carefully and knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa speaking. I already love you more than you can imagine, and I promise I am going to be the best father I know how to be." Theresa ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she could barely breathe. "You are going to be wonderful. I have no doubts about that." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Theresa found the summer heat oppressive as her belly grew. Warren was endlessly solicitous, constantly worrying that she was doing too much or not eating enough or not resting enough. Consuela came by frequently with advice and herbal teas that were supposed to help with various discomforts, and the other ranch wives in the area made a point of visiting and sharing their own experiences of childbirth and motherhood. In late September, as the heat finally began to break and the cottonwoods along the river turned gold, Theresa went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, and there were moments when Warren thought he might lose his mind with worry. But Consuela was there, calm and competent, guiding Theresa through the process and assuring Warren that everything was progressing normally. Finally, in the late afternoon of the second day, their son was born. He came into the world squalling with indignation, his tiny face red and his fists waving. Warren cut the cord with shaking hands and then watched in awe as Consuela cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket before placing him in Theresa's arms. "A son," Theresa said softly, her face glowing despite her exhaustion. "Warren, we have a son." Warren sat beside her on the bed, one arm around her shoulders and one finger gently touching the baby's impossibly tiny hand. The little fingers closed around his immediately, gripping with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never quite settled on anything definite. Now, looking at the tiny person they had created together, Theresa knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas, after my father. He made mistakes, but he loved me the best way he knew how. I would like our son to carry his name." "Thomas Vaughn," Warren said, testing how it sounded. "Tommy, I like it." "Welcome to the world, Tommy." The baby squirmed and made a small mewling sound, and both parents laughed with delight at this evidence of their son's personality. Consuela shooed Warren out of the room so Theresa could rest, but he was back within the hour, unable to stay away from his new family. Over the next weeks and months, Warren proved himself to be a devoted father. He could spend hours just watching Tommy sleep, marveling at the perfection of his tiny features. He paced the floor during colicky nights, singing off-key lullabies until the baby finally settled. He changed diapers without complaint and learned to swaddle like an expert. And when Tommy smiled his first real smile at 6 weeks old, Warren practically ran to find Theresa to tell her about it. "He smiled at me," Warren said, breathless with excitement. "A real smile, not just gas. He looked right at me and smiled." Theresa laughed at his enthusiasm. "He knows his papa. Of course he smiled at you. I know everyone says this about their own child, but he is exceptional. I can tell already. He is going to be smart and strong and kind. He is going to be everything good in this world." "Well, he certainly has a good example to follow," Theresa said, pulling Warren down for a kiss. "You are already the father I hoped you would be." As Tommy grew, the ranch seemed to grow with him. Warren expanded his herd and built a new barn. Theresa started keeping chickens and established a productive vegetable garden. They hired a hand to help with the heavy work, a young man named Jesse, who proved to be reliable and good with cattle. The ranch became known for producing quality horses and beef, and Warren's reputation as an honest dealer spread throughout the territory. But more than the material success, it was the sense of family that made the ranch a true home. There was always laughter echoing off the walls, whether it was Tommy's delighted giggles as Warren tossed him in the air, or Theresa's amused response to one of her husband's terrible jokes. There were family dinners with the Martinez clan and lazy Sunday afternoons spent picnicking by the river. There were holidays celebrated with decorations and special meals and small gifts exchanged with much ceremony. Tommy took his first steps on his first birthday, wobbling across the front room from Theresa to Warren while both parents cheered him on. He said his first words shortly after, "Pa," which made Warren puff up with pride even as Theresa pretended to be offended that Mama had not come first. He was a happy child, curious and adventurous, always getting into things he should not and keeping both parents on their toes. When Tommy was 2, Theresa found herself pregnant again. This time the news was less of a shock and more of a pleasant confirmation of something they had both hoped for. Warren wanted Tommy to have siblings, having grown up lonely as an only child himself, and Theresa agreed. The ranch was thriving, and they had plenty of room and resources for another baby. Their daughter was born in the spring, a much easier birth than Tommy's had been. She had Theresa's dark hair and Warren's blue eyes, and from the first moment, she was clearly going to have a personality all her own. They named her Alice, after Warren's mother who had passed when he was young. Tommy was fascinated by his new sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help take care of her. Warren and Theresa were careful to make sure he still got plenty of attention, not wanting him to feel displaced, but Tommy seemed to genuinely adore the baby. He would bring her toys and sing to her in his toddler voice and get genuinely upset when she cried. With 2 children, the ranch became even more lively. There was always something happening, some small drama or achievement to celebrate. Tommy started helping with small chores around the ranch, following Warren everywhere and trying to copy everything his father did. Alice grew into a determined little girl who knew her own mind from an early age and was not shy about expressing her opinions. The years passed in a blur of work and love, and the everyday miracles of watching children grow. Tommy started school in Las Cruces, riding into town 3 days a week with other ranch children. Alice followed when she was old enough, though she declared loudly that school was boring and she would rather stay home with the horses. Theresa kept the house running smoothly, managing the constant chaos with grace and humor. Warren built the ranch into one of the most successful in the region, respected by his neighbors and known for fair dealing through it all. The love between Warren and Theresa only deepened. They still sat on the porch in the evenings when they could, though now they were often joined by children wanting stories or attention. They still found time for each other, stealing kisses in the barn and making love with quiet urgency after the children were asleep. They still talked about everything, their conversations ranging from practical matters of running the ranch to philosophical discussions about life and meaning and the future they were building together. When they had been married for 10 years, Warren took Theresa into town for a special dinner at the hotel restaurant. It was rare for them to go out alone, and Theresa dressed in her best gown while Warren wore the suit he had been married in, which still fit though it was getting a bit tight in the shoulders. They ate a leisurely meal and talked about the years that had passed since that desperate day when she had fainted on his porch. "You ever regret it?" Warren asked as they lingered over coffee. "Staying with me instead of going on to Santa Fe? You never did find your aunt or make that connection." Theresa reached across the table and took his hand. "I have no regrets at all. You are my family, Warren, you and the children. That aunt was a stranger I never met. How could I regret choosing you over someone I did not even know? I just want you to be happy. I know ranch life is hard, especially for a woman. The isolation, the endless work, the worry about weather and cattle prices. Sometimes I wonder if you would have been better off with a different kind of man, someone who could have given you an easier life. Warren Vaughn, you listen to me. I do not want an easier life. I want this life with you. Yes, it is hard sometimes. Yes, there are days when I am tired and frustrated and ready to tear my hair out. But there are also days so beautiful they make my heart ache. Days when I watch you teaching Tommy to rope, or Alice bringing me flowers from the meadow, or all of us sitting together at dinner laughing over some silly thing. Those moments are worth every hardship. You gave me everything when I had nothing. You gave me love and family and a place in this world. I could never regret that." Warren's eyes were suspiciously bright as he raised her hand to his lips. "I am the one who got the better end of that deal, you know. You saved me just as much as I saved you that day, maybe more. Then we are even. And we have 10 years of happiness behind us, and hopefully many more ahead." "To many more years," Warren agreed, raising his coffee cup in a toast. They returned home to find the children asleep and Jesse dozing in a chair by the fire, having agreed to watch them for the evening. After Warren paid him and sent him home, he took Theresa's hand and led her to their bedroom. They made love slowly, tenderly, reaffirming the bond between them without words. Afterward, lying wrapped in each other's arms, Warren whispered, "Thank you for choosing me, Theresa Vaughn." "Thank you for catching me when I fell," she whispered back. The years continued to pass, bringing changes both expected and unexpected. Tommy grew into a tall young man who was the image of his father, with the same steady temperament and quiet strength. He took to ranching naturally, and by the time he was 16, he was doing the work of a full hand. Alice grew into a spirited young woman who could outride most of the boys in the county and had opinions about everything. She announced at 15 that she was going to be the first female cattle buyer in New Mexico, and no one who knew her doubted she would accomplish exactly that. Warren's hair turned fully gray and his face gained more lines, but he was still strong and capable, still the steady presence at the center of the family. Theresa's dark hair gained threads of silver at the temples, and her hands showed the wear of years of hard work. But she was still beautiful in Warren's eyes, still the woman he reached for first thing every morning and last thing every night. Consuela Martinez had become more than a friend over the years, had become like a mother to Theresa and a beloved aunt to the children. When Ramon passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68, Theresa held Consuela while she cried, and Warren made all the arrangements for the funeral. The Martinez children, now adults with families of their own, gathered around their mother and supported her through her grief. At the funeral, Consuela pulled Theresa aside and said, "You have been like a daughter to me. I want you to know that. When you came here all those years ago, so lost and scared, I knew Warren had found something special. I was right. You have made him happy, and you have given me the gift of your friendship. Thank you for that." Theresa hugged her tight. "You have given me just as much. You taught me how to be part of a community, how to be a good neighbor and friend. You helped me become who I am today." Life continued its inevitable march forward. Tommy married a sweet girl from town named Catherine, and they had a son of their own, making Warren and Theresa grandparents. Alice eventually did become a cattle buyer, though she had to fight for the privilege and prove herself twice over because she was female. She did not marry until she was 30, finally finding a man strong enough to match her personality in a rancher from Arizona named Jack. Through all these changes, the ranch remained the constant center of the family. Warren and Theresa eventually handed over most of the day-to-day operations to Tommy and Jesse, who had become a full partner in the business. But they still lived in the ranch house and still took their evening walks around the property they had built together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Tommy and Catherine were there with their 3 children. Alice and Jack came from Arizona with their twin daughters. The Martinez family turned out in force, 3 generations strong. There were friends and neighbors, old hands who had worked for Warren over the years, even the priest from Las Cruces, who had married them all those decades ago. As the party wound down and the sun set in spectacular fashion over the mountains, Warren took Theresa's hand and led her away from the crowd to their favorite spot on the porch. They sat together in the old rocking chairs they had bought 20 years ago, watching the last light fade from the sky. 30 years, Warren said wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like no time at all, and sometimes it feels like you have been with me forever." "Both things are true," Theresa said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I do not even want to try." "Do you remember that day, when you showed up half dead on my porch? Every detail. I remember thinking this was the end, that I had come as far as I could go. I remember the sound of the door opening and wondering if I was dreaming. And I remember opening my eyes and seeing you, and thinking that if this was death, it was not as bad as I had feared." Warren laughed softly. "I remember carrying you inside and thinking how light you were, how fragile. I remember being terrified you would die before I could help you. And then I remember those first few days, watching you get stronger and feeling something I had not felt in years. Hope, possibility, the sense that my life was about to change in ways I could not predict. It did change. We both changed. We became who we were always meant to be." "Together," Warren agreed. "Everything good in my life has come from you being in it. Our children, our grandchildren, this ranch that we built into something real and lasting. All of it traces back to that day when you fell at my feet and I carried you inside and, well, never let you leave." Theresa lifted her head to look at him, and even in the dim light he could see the love shining in her eyes. "I never wanted to leave. From that first day, some part of me knew I was home, that you were home. The rest of my life has just been proving that first instinct right." Warren kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that contained 30 years of love and partnership and shared joy. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "To 30 more years," Warren said. To 30 more, Theresa agreed, though they both knew that was an ambitious hope given their ages. Warren was 62 now and Theresa 52, and while they were both still healthy, they were not young anymore. But whatever time they had left, they would spend it together, just as they had spent every day since that fateful afternoon when a dying woman stumbled onto a lonely cowboy's porch and changed both their lives forever. They rocked together in comfortable silence as the stars came out overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss on this very porch so many years ago. From inside the house came the sounds of their family, the laughter and conversation and occasional squeal of grandchildren being chased by their parents. It was a good sound, a sound that spoke of life and continuity and love passed down through generations. No regrets. Warren asked one more time, needing to hear her say it. Not a single one, Theresa answered firmly. Fainting on your porch was the best thing that ever happened to me. Warren laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. Only you would say something like that. Most people would consider nearly dying to be a bad thing. But I did not die. You saved me, and then you loved me. How could I see that as anything but a gift? They sat together until the night grew cold and someone came looking for them, worried that they had wandered off. Hand in hand, they went back inside to rejoin their family, to finish celebrating the life they had built together from nothing but hope and hard work, and a love that had sustained them through every challenge. The years that followed were gentler than those that had come before. Warren and Theresa gradually withdrew from the active work of the ranch, content to let the younger generation take over while they enjoyed the fruits of their decades of labor. They spent their days in quiet pursuits, Theresa with her garden and her correspondence with Alice in Arizona. Warren with the beautiful horses he bred more for pleasure now than profit. They took pleasure in their grandchildren, who visited often and loved hearing stories of the old days when Grandpa had been a wild cowboy and Grandma had nearly died before finding him. Tommy proved himself an excellent rancher, expanding the operation while maintaining his father's reputation for honesty and quality. Catherine was a good wife and mother, and Theresa was grateful that her son had found such happiness. Alice thrived in Arizona, becoming a force to be reckoned with in the cattle industry, and raising daughters who were as fierce and independent as she was. Jack wrote regularly to assure his in-laws that he was doing his best to keep up with his formidable wife, and the love between them was evident in every line. Consuela remained close until her death at 79, passing peacefully with her family around her. Theresa mourned her deeply, having lost not just a friend but a second mother. Warren held her through her grief, understanding as only a partner of so many years could understand. They planted a rose bush in Consuela's memory in the ranch garden, and Theresa tended it faithfully until it grew into a magnificent plant that bloomed every spring without fail. As Warren passed 70, his body began to show the wear of a lifetime of hard physical labor. His joints ached on cold mornings and his hearing was not what it once was. But his mind remained sharp and his love for Theresa never wavered. She was the first thing he reached for when he woke and the last thing he saw before he slept, and he considered himself blessed beyond measure for every day he had with her. Theresa herself was 60 now, and while she remained active, she too felt the weight of years. Her hands sometimes trembled with the early signs of arthritis, and her vision required spectacles for close work. But she was content in a way she had never imagined possible during those desperate days of her youth. She had a husband who adored her, children and grandchildren who brought her joy, and a home that was full of love and laughter. What more could anyone ask for? On a cool October evening much like the one 38 years earlier, when Theresa had first stumbled onto Warren's porch, they sat together watching the sunset. Warren had his arm around Theresa's shoulders, and she was tucked against his side, fitting perfectly as she always had. "I have been thinking," Warren said slowly, "about what comes after." "After what?" Theresa asked, though she suspected she knew. "After us. After we are gone. I want you to know that whatever happens, I am at peace with it. I have had a good life, the best life, because of you. If I died tomorrow, I would die happy." "Please do not die tomorrow," Theresa said, her voice catching. "I am not ready to be without you yet." "I am not planning to die tomorrow," Warren assured her with a soft laugh. "I am just saying when the time comes, whenever that is, I want you to know how grateful I am. For everything. For 38 years of happiness. For the family we built. For choosing to stay with me that day instead of moving on." Theresa twisted in his arms so she could look at him directly. "Warren Vaughn, I am going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. You act as if you did me some great favor by taking me in, but the truth is we saved each other. I was dying, yes, but you were dying too in your own way. You were lonely and cut off and had forgotten how to let anyone close. We healed each other. We built this life together. So when you thank me for staying, remember that I am equally grateful that you let me stay, that you opened your heart and your home and gave me a reason to keep living. That is the real gift, and it goes both ways." Warren's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "How did I get so lucky to find you? Luck had nothing to do with it. It was fate, destiny. Whatever you want to call it, we were meant to find each other that day. I truly believe that." "I believe it too," Warren said, and kissed her with all the tenderness of nearly 4 decades of love. They remained on the porch until the stars came out, talking quietly about their life together and their hopes for their children and grandchildren. Eventually, the cold drove them inside, and they made their way to the bedroom they had shared for so many years. As they settled into bed, Warren pulled Theresa close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, right over his heart where she could hear its steady beat. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Warren whispered back. "Always." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found in each other everything they needed to be complete. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. But inside the ranch house, there was only warmth and love and the quiet contentment of a life well lived. Years continued to pass, each one a gift that Warren and Theresa cherished. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by family, marveling at how their chance meeting had blossomed into such abundance. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin to have children of their own, making them great-grandparents and expanding the family tree even further. Warren lived to see his 78th birthday, celebrating it quietly with Theresa by his side. His health had declined gradually over the previous few years, but he remained in good spirits and refused to complain. On a warm summer evening, he sat on the porch with Theresa as they had done thousands of times before, holding her hand and watching the sun set over the land he loved. "I want you to promise me something," he said quietly. "Anything," Theresa replied. "When I am gone, I want you to stay here. Keep living. Be happy. Enjoy the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. Do not spend your remaining years mourning me. I will be at peace knowing you had a good life after me. Warren, promise me, Theresa. It is important to me." She looked at him, seeing the earnestness in those blue eyes that had captivated her from the first. "I promise, but you have to promise me something too." "What is that?" "That you will not give up too easily, that you will fight to stay with me as long as you can." "I am not ready to let you go yet." "I promise," Warren said, squeezing her hand. I will stay as long as I am able." He kept that promise for another 3 years, remaining mentally sharp even as his body slowly failed. He died peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night with Theresa beside him. She woke to find him still and silent, his face relaxed and peaceful, and she knew immediately that he was gone. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain that took her breath away. For 43 years, Warren had been her partner, her love, her best friend. The world without him in it seemed impossibly empty. But even through her tears, she remembered her promise. She would stay. She would live. She would honor his memory by continuing to find joy in the life they had built together. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the respect and affection Warren had earned in his long life. Tommy spoke about his father's integrity and kindness. Alice told stories that made everyone laugh through their tears. The priest from Las Cruces, now quite elderly himself, spoke about the love between Warren and Theresa as an example of what marriage should be. Theresa accepted condolences with grace, though inside she felt hollowed out and empty. When everyone finally left, and she was alone in the ranch house for the first time in decades, she went to the bedroom and lay down on Warren's side of the bed, breathing in the scent of him that still lingered on the pillow. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she slept. In the days and weeks that followed, Theresa learned to navigate her grief. She had her children and grandchildren who visited often and made sure she was never alone for too long. She had her garden and her correspondence and the endless tasks of running a household. She had her memories, 43 years of them, each one a treasure she could take out and examine when the loneliness became too much. She lived for another 7 years after Warren's death, seeing her 85th birthday and remaining sharp and active until near the end. She took great pleasure in her ever-expanding family, meeting great-great-grandchildren and marveling at how one desperate woman's stumble onto a lonely cowboy's porch had led to so many lives, so much love. On a crisp autumn evening much like the one when she had first arrived at the ranch all those decades ago, Theresa sat on the porch in her rocking chair. She was tired, more tired than she had ever been, and she knew with a certainty that her time was coming to an end. She was not afraid. If anything, she felt a sense of anticipation, a readiness to see Warren again. Tommy found her there the next morning, peacefully gone, a slight smile on her face as if she had seen something wonderful in her last moments. On her lap was an old photograph of her and Warren taken on their 10th wedding anniversary, both of them young and vibrant and looking at each other with unmistakable love. The family buried Theresa beside Warren in the small cemetery outside Las Cruces, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains. Her tombstone, placed next to his, reads simply, "Theresa Dalton Vaughn, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She found love when she fell." Below that was carved the year of her birth and death, and between them, a whole lifetime of happiness. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own stories to the legacy Warren and Theresa had started. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original bedroom where Theresa had first woken up in Warren's care was preserved as a sort of shrine to the couple who had built it all. On anniversaries and special occasions, family members would gather at the ranch, and someone would inevitably tell the story of how it all began. How Theresa Dalton had been dying of hunger and thirst when she stumbled onto Warren Vaughn's porch. How he had carried her inside and nursed her back to health. How they had fallen in love and built a life together that lasted over 4 decades and produced generations of children who carried their legacy forward. It became a family legend, the story of the woman who fainted from hunger and the cowboy who saved her and never let her leave. It was told to children to teach them about love and resilience and the importance of kindness to strangers. It was told to newlyweds to show them what a strong marriage could be. It was told at funerals to remind everyone that love could transcend even death. And in the telling and retelling, Warren and Theresa lived on, their love story becoming part of the fabric of the family, the ranch, and the land itself. The dust of New Mexico that had nearly killed Theresa that day had instead become the foundation for a legacy that would endure for generations. The porch where she had collapsed became a place of pilgrimage for family members, who would stand there and imagine that desperate woman taking those last steps before falling. The ranch prospered through the decades, weathering droughts and economic downturns and all the changes that time brought. Through it all, it remained the Vaughn Ranch, a testament to what two people could build when they found each other at exactly the right moment. The land that Warren had worked so hard to tame and Theresa had helped turn into a true home continued to sustain their descendants, providing not just a livelihood but a connection to their past and to the love story that had started it all. In the end, what had begun with a young woman's desperate stumble onto a stranger's porch had become something far greater than either Warren or Theresa could have imagined. It had become a family, a legacy, a story of love and redemption that would be told for generations to come. They had saved each other that day, two lost souls finding in each other everything they needed to build a life of meaning and purpose and joy. And though they were gone, their love remained, woven into every board of the ranch house, every fence post, every blade of grass. It lived on in the faces of their descendants, in the values they had passed down, in the story that would never be forgotten. Warren Vaughn and Theresa Dalton had found each other against all odds, had chosen each other when they could have walked away, and had built something that would outlast them both. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West of New Mexico Territory in 1878, a time when life was hard and death was never far away. But it was also a timeless story, one that proved that love could flourish even in the harshest conditions, that two people who found each other at the right moment could change not just their own lives, but the lives of generations yet to come. And it all started with a simple act of kindness, a cowboy opening his door to find a dying woman on his porch, and making the decision in that moment to help her, to save her, to never let her leave. That decision had rippled forward through time, creating waves of love and life that extended far beyond anything Warren could have imagined when he carried that fragile woman into his house all those years ago. In the end, that was the real miracle of their story. Not that they found each other, though that was remarkable enough, but that they chose each other every day afterward. Through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a life, they chose each other. And in doing so, they created something beautiful and lasting that would never truly die. Their love had become eternal, preserved not just in the memories of those who had known them, but in the very bones of the land they had worked together, in the family they had created, in the story that would be told as long as there were Vaughns to tell it. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Warren and Theresa were together still, watching over the legacy they had left behind and smiling at how one desperate day in 1878 had led to such abundance.